So I just had finished testing new speakers in a 79 Super Reverb, and I got a call from a guy who's a guitar tech for a major touring band. I don't know if I should say who they are, but I think it's apt that I was working on a 1979 amp. And they're playing tonight in Memphis at a huge outdoor festival in front of probably 100,000 people. And they go on about 10:30. It's, what time is it now? It's like 3 maybe? I can't look at my phone because I'm recording with this. It's 3. So I've got about 7 hours. Got 2 Mesa Strategy power amps. The main one went down and the backup went down. So I said I can't promise a miracle, but if it's possible to fix one or both within this time window, I will. So I'm going to share with you guys what I find and what I do, but I'm just setting the camera up there where it is, and I'm not using the lav mic for this, and I'm not going to be adjusting things other than just making sure that the general focus of what I'm doing here is good, because I can't stop. I've got so little time to do this. And I'm working some funky stuff has been done here in the past on this Vactrol. It's probably not the issue. It's got a mishmash of screen grid resistors. Let's start with the fuses, and then I'm going to measure screen grid resistors because they often fail in Mesas. And you can see that this one has failed, this one's 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 failed. Original, 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 original. And I'm going to look and see if any of these filter caps have any bulges or leaks. In general, the big sprogs that Mesa used are pretty good. And I'm looking for any discolored resistors or diodes, which are common in Mesas. It's been serviced before. Got a lot of dust in here. And it's just every touring guitarist's nightmare to have a gig like this, and on the day, your main amp goes down and your backup goes down. So, where are the fuses on a Strategy, and why am I hearing something move around inside? So 2 separate problems. I will deal with them separately. Let's get this here so I can access the 3 fuses. Let's get the right size screwdriver to fit that. If you can't see everything I'm doing here, I apologize. I don't have time to refocus. So the 8 amp slow blow is burned. And that is an 8 amp fuse. That's the mains fuse. That's not a good sign. And the cathode A is 1 amp. Cathode B is supposed to be 1 amp. Cathode B came out okay. It is a good fuse. It is a 1 amp, so that goes back in. And why isn't this one wanting to come out? The whole fuse holder is a little bit loose. The fuse holder has been a little bit abused in the past. I'm not a huge fan of this type of fuse holder. There it goes. It is blown. It was a 1 amp and it is very blown. Let's see what I have in the way of fuses. 8 amps is kind of odd. And it's a Saturday, Tube Depot is closed, and the local hardware store that has specialty parts may be closed. Here's a 1 amp fuse. I'm gonna ask my wife, see if I'm called that specialty hardware store. I may have to ask my wife to run and pick one up for us. And I'll call the hardware store to have like 5 ready to be picked up. But let's see, do I have an 8 amp already? 8 amp. All right, I've got 1 8 amp fuse, and I've got several 6s and some 10s. So let me pause here for a second. Let me see if that hardware store is open and see if I can sweet talk my wife. They are closed, so I doubt I'll be able to get proper slow blow 3AG fuse today. I'll see what's going on with the second one. If this one works, I suspect we have a bad power tube or screen resistor. Before we get to the tubes, because the tubes are potentially a nightmare scenario, I need to see if I can get in there and slightly tighten that one fuse holder, which is slightly loose. All right. And while this is doing that, I'm going to open up my other computer and get the schematic so I'll know which set of tubes are affected by which fuses. I expect it's these 3 for that fuse, these 3 for that fuse. It's on the cathode. Yeah, it's got to be these 3. I don't need to look up the schematic for that. So let's look and see here. they got a Zener string, and over here they've got two separate screen supplies here for each side. Let's check make sure that neither of those strings has failed. Forgive me if I don't explain everything I'm doing. I don't have time. All right, those two Zeners or diodes measure fine. All right, all those diodes are fine. So let's check the screen grid resistors. 503, 499, 470, 470, 471, 470. Let's check on this side, though I don't think the problem's over here. 464, 464, 490. If I have time and the amp is otherwise fixed, I'm going to replace these carbon comp screen grid resistors so that they don't have to get a guy like me in another city. 495, 465, 463. Lots of dust. Now let's measure the grid stoppers, make sure that no grid stopper has failed, causing a tube to not have bias. 150 ohms. Is that right? 150 ohms. 150 ohms. 1.5K. 1.5K. 151. Must be that simulclass nonsense that the Mesa is doing. It's not my job to make it what I want it to be. It's my job to make it work. Let's check the other side, though I suspect all the problems on my left. God, there's so much dust in here. 150, 150, 150. I know this is riveting to watch, but this is what it takes. 150, 1.5, 1.5. All right. Where's my drink? I'm gonna grab a bite of cold pizza, and then I'm gonna check some paths to ground on the board, specifically the bias stuff on each side. I've had Mesas from this era where the board trace burns on a bias, or you get terrible leakage to these orange drop caps, and then there's way too little DC on the grid, as in what's supposed to be negative, say 36 volts, drops down to negative 20, the tube dies. So one of these tubes is likely bad, but I want to make sure there's not a cause for that. So while I chew this cold pizza, I'm going to take the 6L6s, 5881s, out of this side. I'm going to put them down on my bench in the order that they're in here. I'm going to check each one as I go. Pardon the chewing sounds. I wasn't expecting to be dropping everything. This one's got a little discoloration, possibly. That's at that socket. This one's good. This one seems okay. This one seems okay. And this one seems okay. So that's all of these six. And I've got them on my bench. You can't see it, but trust me, they're in the order I pulled it. I have another bite of my pizza while I pull these out and do the same thing. Even though I don't suspect there's a problem there, I want to compare voltages on the two different sides of the amp. So if this one's at negative 49 and this one's at negative 12, I know where the problem area is. It's not that I am averse to getting the schematic for this. I'm fully capable of it, and I may resort to that. But Mesa schematics aren't really that useful in that they don't. You can know that it's R whatever, but you can't see R whatever on the board because the numbers are beneath the components. I mean, I could say it's attached to C53. I can see C53, but I also know that these are going to be the input. Or these are going to be the output coupling caps for the two sides of this amp. This side's phase inverters, two separate power amps. So it's going to be associated stuff here, and I can look at it and say, okay, those two resistors have traces which put them in parallel with each other. Here's a bias supply with two caps, and from there, we'll see where it goes. Is it these two? Are these the bias resistors? That would make sense. And then I just go here and say, well, what are they? What do they measure? 22K. That can't be a bias. That's got to be a dropping resistor. So here's got to be one of. This got to be one of the bias resistors here, and this is the other one. So, like they're 100Ks. So that's that on this one, and that'll be that on this one too. And I imagine that this is tied to here or here. All right, that's tied to right there. That means this one's probably tied to here because they're mirroring. Great, so I can compare the voltage here and the voltage here, and that's much faster, believe it or not, than going through the schematic and saying, well, I wonder if that's R83,000 or not. You know, I'm just approaching it the other way. I haven't mentioned it, but I've also done the sniff test. I don't smell anything bad in here. So now I've got no tubes in the amp, and I'm gonna unwind its power cable. I'm gonna plug it up into my current limiter. So even if something is wrong, nothing will burn. And I don't have any output tubes, so I don't have to worry about hooking up a speaker right now. I just want to see what the voltages are looking like and if there is any frightening surge of current. Channel A, channel B, standby, power. We should have power. I don't care about seeing the front. I care about watching for smoke and watching my current limiter. So let's power it on. Dim glow on the current limiter bulb that then goes down, and that's good. Fan's working. I suppose that's good. Go and measure DC voltage now. So the positive side of these bias caps should be ground, which means I should have negative voltage right here. 40. Let me flip the lead so you see it negative. Actually, you're not seeing it. It doesn't really matter at all, does it? Anyway, so we got negative 47.58 there. And on this side, we've got negative 7.5. So that's really good. That means that there's probably not a leaky cap, even though these are 400 volt caps, which can have more than 400 volts on them. Let's see what they actually have on them at the moment. It's in standby, it doesn't have any, so I gotta recheck the bias when I take it out of standby. Sorry. Usually I plan what I'm gonna do a little bit ahead of time before I do it, so I'm less rambling. But right now there is no B plus on the side of these caps. We had 47.5, 47.5 negative. Let's see if that changes as the B plus is applied to these caps. Let's do it on both sides. I'm watching my current limiter, see if it changes. No big glow, that's good. So now, where we had 47.58, I believe, we've got 47.38, 35. I'll check that in a minute, see if it drops some more. Over here we've got 47.3, 47.3. So they've stabilized. And the reason that happens is that the other side of this coupling cap has got 367 volts on it right now. That's gonna go down as the amp is loaded down by when I put the power tubes back in place. But that 372 unloaded is really close to the 400 volt max rating of this. They should really have used 630 volt caps. And that's something that fails a lot in Maces. And the typical thing is if it begins to leak, you get positive DC on this side where the negative is, it brings the negative more towards zero and tubes don't last. It's staying now about 47, 47. So I'm not seeing anything too worrisome there. So I suspect it may just be this tube. Now, if that's the case, we have one bad 5881, and maybe more than one tube. This is the only one that has any discoloration. I can use his 6 tubes on this side. I can use 4 of his tubes over here. Rather than worrying about matching one of my tubes to that that goes in the replacement slot to that one that's bad, I can probably just find 2 6L6 or 5081s to go in these 2 spots. So these we match to each other, these we match to each other, these we match to each other. Since he's only using one side at a time. This is the side he uses, this is the backup side, etc., etc. If that's the case, then this side total current draw will match this side's current draw. It's not ideal. In an ideal world, I get him 6 or 12 all new 5881s or 6L6s. Last time I checked, this was not, in fact, an ideal world, and it is Saturday afternoon, and all the tube stores are closed. And that's something that most people can't even say. I live in a town where there are tube stores, or at least one. But I happen to have an awful lot of amps here, some of which have very good 6L6s. I think I've got a Mesa there with some good 6L6s. So I can sell this very famous wealthy man a pair of good 6L6s so he can play in front of 100,000 people tonight. And I'll use that to buy the other client another pair of 6L6s. It won't affect the repair time on that other amp. All right, got a pair of Tungsol 6L6 SDRs, which should fit. And again, my preference would be to have all matched tubes of all the same type, etc., etc. But slight imbalance should be fine. Probably sound pretty much the same as what everyone's used to. And it's a lot better than having to cancel a gig or go acoustic unexpectedly in front of 100,000 people. So I'm putting back the tubes on this side, all but the one that had that discoloration, which was here, and its mate. If I take this back well before 10:30 and say, oh, it had bad fuses, and you had one bad tube, I think they'll be very happy. Now, normally, when an amp has a failure like that, especially an amp that's going to go out on the road on a major tour, I would insist on doing 24 hours of burn-in tests and high volume playing, simulate many full volume gigs before I said yes, good to go. Not going to be an option in this case. All right, so I've got it on the current limiter. I'm going to hook up a dummy load for right now. I initially don't care about what it sounds like. I want to know that it's working and safe. If there's any potential for smoke or the current's too high, the sound is immaterial. Let me make sure I've got my load set to the right setting. Looks like they're using 16, but I've got two 150 watt resistors in parallel to make my 8 ohm load. So I'm going to start with the 8 ohm load since this thing potentially has so much output. Speaking of which, extended deep, half drive, presence level. So I'm put all these at noon because I neither know nor care what they do. I'm going to assume that they have all these set however they want. My concern is just that it not smoke. So I'm going to power it on, and I'm watching my light bulb limiter, but I'm also going to bend over and look at the tubes underneath, make sure there's not a heater problem. All right, got a very light, very steady glow from the bulb, but then it is dimmed down. That's the onrush of current as all the tubes heat up. There are a lot of tubes in here to heat up. And anything with an 8 amp fuse is going to make that bulb glow a little bit. Let them all warm up. Fan doesn't sound very healthy. That might be the current limiter. While looking at the light bulb limiter and the tubes, I'm going to take it out of standby. No real change, no huge change on the light bulb limiter, and no flashes in the tubes. I can see that they are heating up, but we're not seeing any signs of problems. So I think I was right about that discoloration on this one tongue saw. Let's see what the voltages are now that there are tubes in here. They're going to be a little bit low because I've got the current limiter on, but that's for the best right now. Chassis ground right here. That's a safe chassis ground to grab. Screen node raw is 301. This screen I've got 301.5, 300, 298, 296, 301, 301.2. This side is still in standby. I'm not going to worry about it right now. And pin 5 on each tube. Negative 35. Same. All right, I'm going to put it back in standby. And I'm going to change out my dummy load for my actual cab. Let me get that moved over closer. All right, so let's take it out of standby. I've got my 8 ohm cab. And I'm going to turn the level up and see if I hear anything. Some dust on that pot. I would not be surprised if I need to clean some things. I can hear it as I brush the leads. Again, there with my pointer. Make sure all these pots are tight. Everything looks okay. So I'm going to plug a guitar in. Now this is not going to be a very good sound because it is just a guitar going into a low input impedance power amp in. Not, it's going to be a little bit dark and muffled compared to what it should be. If I get it working right, I'll see if I've got an amp here that's working that has an effects loop. I'll give you a taste of what this thing might really sound like. Let's turn that level down now that I've got a guitar there. Let's make sure we're passing signal. All right, that's level. Looking upside down, I had that wrong. Totally forgotten what the front panel controls are. And remember, this thing's not going to be majorly loud with the guitar coming directly in. So this is half drive. I don't know what that does. Oh, that's where that switch is. This is presence. So presence noon level. Oh. I was initially thrown off by some complications from the Mesa Strategy 500 series. I've got the 400 and the 800 and the 256. I didn't have the schematic for this, but the core of it's the same. It's all working now. I have one microphonic tube that's in this channel now. I'll track that down when I test the other channel. But I've got it going through a dual recto I've got here for the preamp, and the preamp of the dual recto is going into this, and I've got the volume on this amp, track 1 volume, because I don't know how the track 2 stuff works, because the manual on this thing sucks. Anyway, the track 1 volume is at 2, and I could play most stages around town just like this. And I won't say what the band is. But for those who see the mystery band tonight in front of 100,000 people, it should be loud as hell. So let's see what the other side of this is sounding like before I call it good. This tube here is the microphonic one that was here. I moved it out of the way. Let's see here. I think I've got another suitable tube handy. All right, older Mesa branded STR. Let's see if it's any damn good. While we check the other channel. Input B, 8 ohm out. Move the camera back. Volume, track 1, 2. Because these things can be loud. Presence, straight up noon. Out of standby. We'll check that microphonics in just a bit. Make sure we get signal. I'm happy with that. Let me tap on this a little bit more. That's fine. Power it off and button this one up. This is the main one. And then take a look at the backup, which is also faulty, and we'll see if that is fixable today. It's got some loose hardware rattling around, so who knows what we'll find in that one. This second one is backup unit. Just had a lot of very loose and missing hardware. It's all got replacement now. It's not all black like the originals, but again, rush job. The amp is working, it's healthy, there's no issues. There are no issues. These preamp tubes are a little bit microphonic, but this is his backup, and his main one has 2 channels, the second channel of which is a backup. So he's got 3 backups, which is why it was unusual and terrible that his backup and his backup and his backup to his first 2 backups all failed. But you know, this buys them time to get to the next major city and sort out some tubes and stuff. There are nothing but good tubes in the main one, which has a side which is backup, and this will work for a Saturday night.